student group. We got that right here. So without further ado, Jadyn, she's going to introduce our guests. And looking forward to a great night, learning a lot, and here we go.
No person shall, in the United States, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. We are here tonight in celebration of Women's History Month, which took place in March, and to spotlight these community members and hear their thoughts on the past, present, and future of Title IX in women's sports. This event was organized by the WW Athletics Jedi Group, our goal being to bring light to issues of social justice on Western's campus and within athletics. I'm going to get started by introducing our panelists for tonight. Okay, to my right, I have Jo Metzger-Levin. Welcome. Jo remains WW's leading all-time scorer in basketball with 1,900 career points and set 15 records during her time as a student athlete with the Vikings. She was twice a finalist for the Wade Trophy, awarded annually to the nation's top women's basketball player in 1980 and 1981. Her career included twice being named an AIAW All-American, and she was inducted into the NAIA Hall of Fame. Following her collegiate career, Metzger-Levin went on to teach, coach, and serve as a director of athletics at Everett High School. And then we have Meri-Jo Borzilleri. Meri-Jo is a journalist, former Western Washington University journalism adjunct professor, sports writer, past collegiate Division III athlete, and a current high school tennis coach. As a 20-year journalist, formerly on staff with the Miami Herald and Colorado Springs Gazette, she has written about Title IX as well as covering men's and women's sports. Last year, she wrote about Western's Title IX history for Western Window magazine and is currently researching a children's book on basketball player Caitlin Clark. Terri McMahan was inducted into the WW Athletics Hall of Fame in 2022 and served as the lead organizer for Western's Title IX event last May. A longtime administrator and coach, McMahan is also a member of the WIA Hall of Fame as both a coach and an athletic director. McMahan was a 3-year letter winner at WW in volleyball and tennis. All right, so I have my first question I'm going to ask you guys. And then after they share, you guys are all welcome to ask them questions as well. So can you share your personal athletic journey and its intersection with Title IX?
Can you all hear me okay? Good. I don't like microphones. Former PE teacher, so I think I'll be okay here. As she said, my name is Jo Metzger-Levin, and I was in high school in 1973 when Title IX initiative was voted on. We had an athletic director, a male athletic director, that was very supportive of women's athletics, and we had 5 years, I believe, to get some women's sports started, and he chose to start that year, unlike, I think Terry knows this, Mount Lake Terrace they were at, and those people waited a couple more years, so we got a head start on them. And they started basketball when I was a freshman in high school. We had some athletic women there, and we were very lucky. We had a coach, a female PE teacher that wanted to learn the game. Before that, it was a rover that you couldn't cross half-court line, and we had some male coaches that were willing to support her and teach her the game so that she could educate us and we would have some opportunities to play basketball. We ended up having a very good team. We placed in the state tournament every year. And my freshman year, we played for the state title. And every year after that, we placed. We just had some great athletes there that really made a difference. But we also had the support of men and our administration that really wanted to give us a head start on that. We also started softball. It was slow pitch, fast pitch then, slow pitch, my sophomore year. And so, again, I feel really lucky because I heard a lot of stories about people that came ahead of me that said, I wish we would have had that opportunity. They didn't have it. They played GAA, which was Girls Athletic Association, where they just kind of play a game with a rival school or something. So, and I played volleyball, basketball, and softball in high school. I got 12 letters. Again, I was really lucky to have the opportunity to play at that level. I don't know if you want me to get into Western at all, or is that the next question? So when I was a senior, my coach knew Linda Goodrich, who was the basketball coach and AD up here, and I guess I could say I was recruited a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of recruiting going on like there is these days. There was no NIL, there was no scholarships. It was just you came to play because you love the game. And I think that made it a great experience because everybody that was here wanted to be here. And I was telling Carmen the story that we used to drive ourselves. They didn't even have transportation back then. You guys, this is your homework assignment. You need to look up what a Dodge Dart is after this, okay? It's a little 4-door car. Paul, you remember this? And they would send us out with 3 cars, and the coach would drive one, and 2 players would drive the other. And these Dodge Darts were nothing to write home about, but that's how we got to the games. I believe my senior year, I remember traveling in bus with the guys team a little bit, but we did have vans at that time, I think. But again, I think we still had to drive them as players and coaches. So times have changed a little bit that way. Let me get my glasses on here and see. Oh, the other thing is we had little money, probably kind of like they have right now, right? Your minimums are $35, ours was probably 10. But we stayed at Hotel Sixes, and next door to Hotel Sixes, every Hotel Six is a Denny's. So our pregame dinners were at Denny's, and we never had, we never got to handle the money. We had to, our coach just paid the bill at the end. I don't remember how we did the other events. I think we had to pay for a lot of our meals. Linda worked hard up here to make sure that we had the same opportunities as the men in the men's sports and other women's sports. She was a really great advocate, and as you all know, Paul Madison was one of the best SIDs in the whole United States and really put Western on the map, where he really made sure that people were aware of Western and that we had some really wonderful talent and some teams and coaches that really were good at participating. So I think that's what I would say. Great.
So yeah, my name is Meri-Jo. Can everybody hear me back there too? Okay, so my Title IX experience is a little bit different. A little bit later, I was in high school from 1976 to 80. It's a really small town. My class was 80 people in high school. And small mountain town. I grew up in Lake Placid, New York, which is a great sports place to grow up in. Had the Winter Olympics twice. And I played all sports, three sports a year in high school. And I just loved to play. I just wanted to play. My very first coach was, I think, my mom. In 7th grade, she decided to coach a soccer team. And we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know what we were missing because there weren't any teams. So I thought that was a great thing, and then played soccer, softball, basketball. Was on the ski team, cross-country ski team in high school, and just had a great time changing with the seasons. There were no really one-sport athlete specialists then. When I was time to decide where to go to college, I wanted to go to Harvard Radcliffe only because they had a women's soccer team. Because there were maybe a handful of schools that had women's soccer teams. So I had my priorities a little bit skewed because I wanted to go there for the soccer, right? Didn't get in, because the academics are really tough. It's tough to get in there. But I ended up going to Johns Hopkins University, which is a small university in Baltimore, Maryland, and they didn't have a soccer team. And I did shed some tears about that. I wish I had the courage to start a team on my own, like people did here. But I played tennis instead, and those are some of my best memories of going to college, is piling in a van with a bunch of women players, not a Dodge Dart, we actually had a van, and going off on a tournament over the weekends, or playing matches, dual matches during the week. my Title IX, even though I didn't really realize it then, because again, we didn't know that, that there could be so much out there. I was just happy to play tennis. You could do that year round. But the coaching wasn't always up to snuff, honestly, when I look back on it now. Because when I was a freshman in college, our coach, I believe, was hired because she had played on the pro tennis tour for a little while and was ranked in the hundreds. But the not so great part of having her coach is that we got in the van to go to our very first away match, and she was driving. And there were some, all different classes, so seniors, juniors, all the way down to us little freshmen, were in the van. And one of the seniors turned around and said, "Hey, we gotta make a stop first before we head out of town." And I said, "Okay, whatever, that's the way college is." So we went and we stopped at a liquor store. So our coach could get some liquor for herself, get a couple of fifths of whatever it was, and I just thought, I guess that's the way college coaching is. That's the way college is. Whatever, what did I know?
Not much has changed, right?
So Coach Flo and her bottle of whatever it was, and we drove to our match, and we stayed overnight, and I don't know what, she must have drank it in her hotel room or whatever. But and we played, those 2 days, and then we came back, and I didn't think anything of it. We got another coach. Flo only lasted one year. She had lasted about 5 years up till then. Then we got another coach who was a very nice, really nice woman, and she was hired because she was the basketball coach, and she was coaching tennis as sort of her second sport, but she had never played. And so this is Division III sports, so this probably doesn't happen too much. She was a squash player, and so I picture the athletic director going close enough and hiring her to coach tennis. She did as well as she could with what she had, and she really worked hard. But I saw her more as a manager of people and team stuff than as somebody who really taught me a lot about tennis. And I admire her for that. But there's still a little regret that I have, that, hey, I wonder if I could have been even better, if I had somebody who had more of that sports coaching experience. So that's mine. Yeah, and then later I became a sports writer and ended up writing about Title IX and those issues. So.
I injured my voice at some point along the way. I think yelling at a kid out of Ferndale was kind of anyway, I lost my singing voice and everything else. So, here I am. My name is Terri McMahan. I also go by McWoman at Title IX events. Title IX informed my entire career. I'm a little older than these two. So I found out in a tough sad little kid way what we didn't get and what we didn't have. And I didn't know there was a term at the time, gender discrimination. I came to learn that pretty well. But as a 7 and 8 year old, I used to go up to our little elementary school every night and play baseball, just playing with my little boy friends. Loved it, loved it. At 9 years old, the little boys started talking about this thing called Little League, and they were so excited because some of the dads were going to coach. They'd get to wear uniforms, they'd get to wear hats. Everybody liked those hats. The thing is that I didn't know that we all couldn't play. So if you can imagine me being like super excited, I wanted to find out more. I wanted to go home and ask my mom and dad if I could play. I was super happy. I loved baseball. And I had a little 9-year-old boy march up to the front of the group. And these were all my friends. He wasn't mean in any way, but he just took it upon himself to explain to me why I didn't get to play and why I didn't belong. And at that point, I became a sad and reluctant spectator. So I knew something was up. A year later, our little elementary school was the host site for the big opening day pageant. And I went up there, and it was just amazing, if you can imagine all those teams, all the different uniforms, all that stuff. And I go home, and my dad asked me how it was, and I said, it was great. I said, Dad, there is something wrong with this. There is something really wrong with this. And he goes, Terri, you're right. There is something really wrong with this. And we didn't have anything organized until I was in 6th grade. I remember a nice woman from the community started a little 4-team softball league, and I was in heaven. I thought that was the best thing ever. But that was it. We probably played 4, 5, 6 games. We probably played everybody twice, so it was 6 games. Got to junior high, and we had that GAA, Girls Athletics Association program that Joe talks about. And we met up for track and field with the other schools in our 4-school district, the Edmond School District. We had a little play day, and afterwards we went into the cafeteria, all 4 teams, and we had punch and cookies, and that's been an ongoing joke for our whole lives. That's what we got. We got punch and cookies after a little friendly against other people. When I got to high school, though, that's when I started seeing advocacy in action. I got into high school in the fall of '69. We were a sophomore, junior, senior, 3-year high school. And pretty much the standard situation at high schools around our state was that whoever the woman PE teacher was the person that coached all the sports. And they made, my mouth is so dry, I'm sorry, they made $129 a sport. But they were there for us. Thank you. I have my keepers here. Thank you.
Keep the mic close to you. Keep it right over you.
So anyways, at that point, the woman we had at Malik Terrace High School was a woman named Maggie King. And there were women at Everett High School where Joe was and various places around the state. They were sick and tired of being told what they couldn't do and why they couldn't do it. And there was just this little grassroots movement to fight that. We owe everything to them, and I think people in my age category get a lot of credit, but I always pass it on to those women that came about 5, 10, 15 years before me. Because even though I didn't have much, I benefited from those women that were out there, out loud, kicking the doors down. Because every movement in our world has started with those out loud, bang the door down kind of people. And they get so much crap. You know, they get criticized so much because they're in your face kind of thing. But I don't know a successful movement that didn't start with in your face type people. And those were some of the women we had in our area. 2 weeks after I graduated high school, Title IX was signed into law. I wanted to go to Western super bad because I understood that I could play some sports here. And I'd sent some letters out to the schools in our state when I was in a career unit in 9th grade. And only one school wrote back to me with a personal letter, and it was Western. It was the chair of the department, a woman named Margaret Aiken. She wrote me a very personal letter about how Western was a front runner in women's sports. They intended to be a leader now and in the future. And if I came to Western, I wouldn't be disappointed. And she was absolutely right. I was able to play volleyball and tennis here. I ended up getting a physical education degree, but all I really wanted to do was play sports. And then I decided, okay, well, I'll be a teacher. And no, I'll be a coach and then a teacher. But I had some really good profs. I remember one in particular, Roy Klumner, really pounded into our heads that it took something to be a good, organized physical education teacher. And if you were good, you were able to apply the same kind of methods as any other discipline in the school. So I focused on being a really good teacher. I was also convinced if you want to be a good coach, guess what you need to be? A good teacher. So I decided I wanted to be the best teacher I could be, the best coach I could be, and Western gave me a first-class education. I have no doubt. I got hired at Ferndale High School, and I need to shout out this little group here. They were my players at Ferndale High School. I don't know how I heard about this or why they showed up, but it's very kind of you to show up. But I coached volleyball and softball at Ferndale for quite a while. I started in the fall of 1978, and they had just built a nice gym facility addition. There were 2 real nice gyms. They took me on a tour. I thought, wow, that's pretty nice. Then they took me to the locker rooms. And when you start looking at inequities in sport, you look at more than what what they're putting out on the floor. You start looking at facilities and different things that you have. So my main memory from that was that in my nice locker room, there was a big, huge equipment storage room. I thought, okay, this is great, nice equipment room. I go into the men's locker room with whoever was taking me on this tour. They don't have a big, huge equipment room. They have a really nice athletic training room with a $10,000 crushed ice machine. I said, well, that's interesting. Now, mind you, this is 1978. We're supposed to be in compliance with Title IX. And of course, I know everything about Title IX. I took a workshop. So I'm just thinking, well, that's weird. And then I realized, well, equipment and organizing it and passing it out, distributing, taking it, well, that's women's work. But the men, they have real sports and they need ice and whirlpool and all this kind of stuff. Well, that fired me up a little bit. I complained a little bit, not too much because I was just newly hired. But I still laugh about this because the athletic director shows up the next day at the door of the locker room. I hear this knock, and it's before school was going to start. So really, really early in the morning, nobody's around. He's standing there with a Coleman ice chest. And he's proud of this solution. And he says, Terry, I've got a solution for the ice situation. Here's what you do. This is a Coleman cooler. This is the best kind of cooler there is. And inside here, there is a roll of plastic bags that I got from the grocery store. They were more than happy to donate this roll of plastic bags. He says, here's what you do. You get here really early in the morning before school starts. You go over to the men's locker room and you fill up all these bags and you put them into your cooler, take them back. He goes, those are gonna still be frozen out by 2:30 because this is a Coleman cooler taking so early. That was their solution. Anyway, fast forward. In 1993, Ferndale opened up the athletic director job. I had just stopped coaching for the first time. I coached volleyball and softball for 15 years, and I decided to apply for this athletic director job. And they opened it up like late in the summer, like late July, and they had it open for 5-10 days. And they opened it actually for 5 days, but I didn't hear anything. So now we're getting into mid-August, haven't heard a thing, and school's about ready to start. Sports are about ready to start. So I get the courage to call the assistant superintendent, also a woman. And I said, hey, I don't want to bug you, but this job's been closed for a while. I'm just trying to figure out the following. Here's what she said. And if you know anything about human resource practices, when a job officially opens and it's posted and it's closed, when it closes, that's your pool of candidates. So keep that in mind. Her response was, wow, Terry, I need to see, I'm not using his real name, I need to see if Joe wants to apply. I'm like, what? I was stunned that, I applied, I was a qualified candidate, and yet she wanted to see if Joe wanted to apply, just in case. Joe, who had missed the deadline, mind you. Anyway, Joe didn't want to apply, so they were stuck hiring me, I guess. They scraped the bottom of that barrel, and they hired the first woman in our league. But I often think how my entire career could have been altered because of that one person, that one decision. And I bring that up because it was 1993, 21 years after Title IX. There were still no women principals in my league, and my league was like Stanwood area, so North Snohomish County on up. There were no women principals. I was the first woman athletic director north of Seattle where there was one, 21 years after Title IX. So when people think that everything's hunky-dory for women's sports these days, you don't have to dig very far to find out that there's a long history there, and there's still a lot of issues getting women kind of moved forward and accepted and that kind of thing. I will tell you that I went on to serve 4 years there and then became a director of athletics at Edmonds School District for 11 years. And then I took a couple years off. There was a terminal illness in my family, but I went back to work in 2010 and spent 7 years with the Highline District, and those were central office, director of athletics positions. And the reason I took those is because I thought that maybe I could have a little more, I could do a little bit more to help out more kids and more coaches and more people in the central office role. But without Title IX, I wouldn't have ever gotten a job, and it may have been even a lot longer. You know, I mean, there's still women that can't go. The first AD conference I went to in the spring of 1994, there were only 5 women listed on those who were in attendance, and there were about 250 people in attendance. A couple years later, there were a few more women, and one of the women in Eastern Washington decided she would have a networking breakfast. And I remember walking into the networking breakfast, there were about 15 women there. I thought, okay, we're making a little progress, but I sit down, and at my place setting, there was a cookbook and a chocolate roast. I thought, wow, we've really come along. I didn't get it. I didn't get it. I wasn't too receptive to that. Maybe that was a nice thing, but it just kind of kept reminding me of how much farther we needed to go. But I ended up having a great career. I served as a director of athletics for 22 years.
Laura? Haley?
What is one thing or a few things that you think could still change in women's sports that could make it better?
Well, we're gonna get into that on the next question, but I can start, because unless you wanna,
Maybe read your quick.
I'll read
Yeah.
the next question.
unless somebody else has another question.
All right. Okay.
Good question.
In recent years, we have seen large strides in recognition of women's athletics nationwide. Can you share some of your thoughts on why we've seen accelerated, sustained excitement and recognition of women's athletics?
I just need to piggyback on one thing that Terry said. We kind of had a situation at Everett High where we had there's Title IX advocates that go out and check facilities and things, and this was probably 20 years ago. And I don't know if any of you know about we have a baseball stadium, that's the Aquasox Stadium. That's the Everett High School baseball stadium. So when these Title IX advocates came in, they went all around the United States and saw that our men had a stadium like that. Our women were playing at a really crappy grass field. They made a decision because they were told there was going to be a lawsuit, and they had to provide a field that was pretty adequate for the women. So with that, we got a beautiful turf field on our campus that our women's softball and our soccer teams, both men and women, got. So, you know, it's great when you have people like that are out watching for you, because our women, their games got canceled all the time, and the men are playing on this great field. So I think that was just one thing I wanted to add to that. So to add where we're headed, I mean, I think women have really developed their skills, and they've worked really hard. Like what you people are doing these days is so much different than what we did. We'd have conditioning, and we'd go to the weight room, but it's nothing like what you have, that you go all year round. We had a little bit of conditioning in the fall, and I just think that, you know, I'll refer a lot to Caitlin Clark and the women in basketball, which I'm sure a lot of you watched, because that's kind of what I know and what I've followed. But you look at the hard work that they've put in and the skills that they've developed, that I think that that's been a real reason why there's been so much change in that situation. You look at Megan Rapinoe and pro soccer, and how she's led the charge with other women about making sure that they had equal rights and equal pay. And, you know, I think that initiative paid off, and the soccer players, there was more of a following and more success with the women's teams than the men's teams, and I think that paid off, and they were being heard. If you look at the women's basketball this year, all year, but you look at the top games that happened through all of the games, but look at down to the Elite Eight and the Final Four, and some of those women that are playing, there's a lot of seniors, but you look at like the freshmen that were making an impact, and all they talked about was how hard they worked through high school, and you know, the opportunities that they had, but they also had to put in a lot of time. You know, these women are leading the charge, where they're showing people and they're showing the world that women can be as successful as men. They have coaches that believe in them. They had communities that band around them. And again, the viewership for those games were unbelievable. There's statistics which I won't get, but I know that there was a couple of the Elite Eight games that there was more people that viewed the women's game than the men's game. The total, there's just, the numbers are staggering if you look it up. And it's just really, you know, even though I was a basketball player, whether I was a soccer or tennis, it brought a lot of hope for me and joy to know that there's finally, you know, recognition and, you know, through hard work, people are really seeing that they are making a difference. The big thing that we'll get into a little bit later too, though, is that how the media and people are covering it, social media. You know, ESPN decided to cover the game this year, but does anybody remember what time the final game was on the Final Four, the final game of the women's game? It was at noon. The men's game was at 6. So and it was on a Sunday. So it was after church, that was good, but I don't know what was going on at 6 at night on Sunday that they couldn't have, you know, played it then. So there's still work to do, but you know, the bottom line is that the men's and women's game were staggered through the Final Four, but if you look back to the Sweet 16, there was men's games and women's games on, and like I know that I wanted to watch both of them, and I think some people chose to watch the women over the men, and if they will, so my point is the progress needs to be made, that let's start making sure that we're showing them on different days as much as we can, or they start in the morning for the, you know, team of 64, looking at, you know, tennis and some of those other things, making sure that they're just looking that it's equal time that we're getting for the viewerships in the evening. I know ESPN heard a lot about that. The other thing is that there's more women-owned companies now, or women CEOs or executives that are really coming forth to sponsor and put their money forward. You know, this again, basketball is what I know the most of, but Seattle Storm is owned by 3 women, and those women came in and just took it by storm. It's good. And said, hey, we're here to support you, and you know, I think having them be role models to show that we need to have these women that are in those positions of authority and financial means, that they come forward and start making sure they support them. I know that Dick's Sporting Goods, it's a woman CEO there, and you saw a lot of Dick's ads. You know, I noticed little things like that throughout. So I think there still needs to be a lot of change there, but I think again, it's just having conversations and making sure that that those women are talking to other people too, and men. You know, the men are coming forward too. State Farm was a huge sponsor this year, and then obviously Neil is making a huge difference for the women in the forefront. Instead of seeing just actors on commercials, you're seeing some of the stars, whether they're the volleyball or basketball or tennis players that are in commercials. And you guys know way more about the Neil stuff than I do, but there's lots of opportunity for funding out there. And I just think that we've made some strides, but like Terry has said, there's always a ways to go, but I think there's lots of opportunities, and I think the storytelling needs to continue, that you hear stories like our stories, or hear stories about other people, whether they're men or women, that are not going to tolerate what Terry tolerated, having this $10,000 ice machine here and a little ice machine over there, or examples like that. And most people, I think, you know, you guys were raised in a time that there's a lot more equity in your minds, and I think you support each other and believe in each other and stand up for each other. And I think this generation coming through is really gonna, I'm really hopeful that it will continue to make a big difference in our equality and athletics. And you know, this Title IX initiative, what she read, I think is 37 words, but it also, a lot of people didn't know this. I was surprised when I went back to Everett High, we did a little Title IX event and got patches for all the kids, and we tried to talk to them about what it was. And I was a little surprised that a lot of, especially the females, didn't really understand what it was. They kind of knew, so we had a lot of good conversations. But it also supports people with disabilities, and I don't know if you know that. And I think that was a really critical component. It wasn't just equality, but it was disability and equality that way too. So yeah, I think we're headed in the right direction, but there's still lots to do.
Yeah, and I agree. So as a sports writer, I come at this with a little bit of a different perspective, in that, first of all, as far as today goes, I just think that we are all witnessing a pivotal point just in the past few weeks with the whole Caitlin Clark phenomenon of sports, and seeing a women's basketball player break out into the general consciousness. So she's become a household name among people that haven't necessarily watched women's basketball before. So women's basketball players, you all probably had heard of her playing at Iowa at the beginning of this season, right? At least. But we got to see, just in the past few weeks, this shift all of a sudden where she's becoming a household name. Anybody see Saturday Night Live? She was on Saturday Night Live. I mean, my God, that's a cultural touchstone right there. And Title IX kind of came, as far as visibility goes, from my perspective, came in sort of fits and starts. I was at the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia. And that was, I think there was a cover of Time magazine said this was going to be the year of the woman in the Olympics, because that was the first Olympics that had women's soccer. And when you think about it, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, that was less than 30 years ago that there was the first time that there was women's soccer at the Olympics. And I was reading about it today because I was at the gold medal game, and the United States was playing China and won in a very exciting game. And it made news because the stadium was at the University of Georgia, where the University of Georgia Bulldogs football team played. And they filled the stadium, and that with 76,000 people. And at that time, that was a record to watch a women's only sport of soccer. And I think it was any sport. And the United States won the gold medal. And I was walking away from the game back to our car. And what struck me is I saw this kid, and he was holding up a sign. And there's this famous player on the United States team at the time named Mia Hamm. Does anybody remember her? She was like the all-time leading scorer, and she was just this wonderful, electric person because she had such a fast first step and such great speed. And she scored. I think she scored that game. But anyway, so this kid was holding up a sign that said, "Mia, give me your shoes," because this kid wanted Mia's cleats. You know, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, the guy knows the first name. And the second thing that was striking to me is this was a boy. Okay, this wasn't a girl. And this kid was probably 10. And I remember thinking, wow, that's something. And now we're seeing, from that moment, you see a generation of young boys growing up with a sister who played sports, a mom who played sports, or maybe a mom who coached sports. And so this generation was a completely different generation than what came before, okay? These were guys that didn't think that it was weird to have a female sports writer in your locker room interviewing you after a game, okay? Because, hey, the sister plays, my sister plays sports, well, so of course they're gonna wanna interview me, be in the locker room to interview people. So that was a significant moment. Then, in 2004, at the Athens Olympics, the Athens Summer Olympics, was the very first time that women wrestlers were allowed in the Olympic Games, okay? So again, in our lifetimes, we're witness to this. And that was significant. Not as big of a sport as soccer was, and it didn't take, the consciousness, it didn't take the consciousness of a whole country, but still, the Olympics was recognizing that the equality of women's sports needed to be part of the Olympics calendar. And now we fast forward from there to Caitlin Clark, and we're watching, when something gets named the Caitlin Clark effect, we're watching a sport, a one person change the economics of a sport, which I think is a great sign of good things to come. Did anybody watch her? So she got drafted last night, right? And I wrote down some numbers from stories, and this goes under the category of what needs to get better. So Caitlin Clark signed a contract, and
See if they can guess. That was in my notes too.
oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, no, but ask them if they have an idea.
So do you have any idea? So she signed a 4-year contract to play for the Indiana Fever. Does anybody know how much she's making?
$95,000 a year.
Yeah, it's $76,000 a year. the first year, and I think it's 78 the second year, and the third year is 90 something, because there's some rookie limits to that, and I think that's the negotiable one. And so that's a first round draft pick. So the first round draft pick for the NBA from last year for a 4-year deal, so same. Anybody take a guess? 50. $55 million. Yeah, versus 338,000, right? And so when you talk about Caitlin Clark changing the economics of the game, and we haven't totally seen that yet, but I think of all those WNBA players, so you know the Sue Birds of the world, and Ann Taurasi, who had to go to Europe and had to go to Russia to play in order to make enough money that was commensurate with their skill, right? Because the WNBA has these limits, has these salary limits, and that's all comes from TV. That's TV money. So the WNBA makes $60 million a year from media rights. Okay, they're going to renegotiate that in 2025. So next year they get to renegotiate that. Anybody can guess what the NBA makes annually from their TV rights? $2.7 billion. Okay, and so they have got a multi-year for $24 billion right now. That's going to run out this summer. They're going to renegotiate, and it's going to be estimated to be $60 to $72 billion. And I don't know how many years that is, but geez, people, oh my goodness, right? So that's the disparity, right? That's the huge disparity right now that sort of needs to be talked about. Any marketing business majors here?
Yeah.
Marketing business? Yeah. I am imploring your generation, and to partner up with some savvy business people that are in the business of sponsoring or backing women's sports, to make it so my theory, my thinking is that there's been all these comparisons. Okay, how much more is it? How much money does Caitlin Clark now command for ticket price for a ticket? So the Indiana Fever ticket price has gone way up since they knew that she was going to be the first round draft pick, right? And there's all these comparisons made about, oh, this is so great, this women's sports are commanding these really high ticket prices. Well, I take exception to that. I'm not so sure it's such a good idea, right? Because I want some of you people, marketing majors, we don't always have to, why do we have to follow in men's footsteps when we come to like an industry like this, right? Because how many people here find it hard or know how difficult it is to go see an NBA game or a high-ranked college basketball game, how expensive that is, and go to a Seahawks game. So I say the model's broken, and there are a heck of a lot of really smart women executives or people that back women's sports, and that they should find a way to make this affordable for people so a dad can bring his family of 4 and his daughter to see these games, because the men have it set up where we're being priced out. You know, that dad is being priced out to take his young daughter to see people that she should be seeing, see women's sports. So I challenge you to find a way to make that work, to not follow in the men's footsteps, because that hasn't worked to me. And I think that would be an interesting challenge, and I think it's something that's doable. Sure, pay Caitlin Clark the amount that she deserves, which is a lot more than this, and pay women's sports and women's athletes the amount they deserve. But figure out a way to not have that be so exclusive, and exclude so many people, and exclude people like us who grew up playing and loving to go watch sports. I'm done.
That was a lot of stuff there. I'm gonna take it back just a little bit. I think that the current interest in women's sports has to do with a lot of things. And yes, there was a star player who commanded a lot of attention. But I'm gonna take you back to the late 60s, early 70s, because I think that the changes in our laws And what's happened over time is what has created the interest. And I'll just very quickly say in the late 60s, early 70s, it was a time of movements. The civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement. And the civil rights movement is what integrated our classrooms. You know, way back then, little white kids were going to school over here and kids of color were going to school over there, and don't you ever mix them up. You don't even think twice about that now. Title IX rolls around, it's part of the Education Amendments Act. Nothing in that act said anything about sports. It was about higher education. Women at universities were discriminated against horribly. They were told they couldn't get into medical schools, dental schools, law schools. They were turned away at every turn. Every turn they were turned away. That was a brilliant statement right there. But something had to happen, and during the late 60s, there were lots of conversations going on in Congress, and then people were getting upset and protesting outside of Congress, and that's when this all came about. So I see the interest in women's sports as being something that has grown over time. Those types of legislations force behavior change. And a lot of people went kicking and screaming with that behavior change. Over time, though, you have some generations that grow up, little kids aren't born into this world discriminating against people. They don't know any better. So if you put kids of all colors in a classroom, they don't think twice about it. You have little boys growing up next to little girls playing sports. They don't think twice about it. In fact, most of the little kids programs, I think, are still co-ed type programs until they get to a higher age. Nobody thinks twice about it. It's like what was stated here earlier. Brothers and sisters grow up playing, neighbors play, moms, dads, they all played. And the other thing that I think really turned it around when I was starting to coach and kind of watching different behaviors from people is that once men started having little girls, they wanted them to be able to have the experience that they had. And I noticed that where I was teaching and coaching, my teams eventually started doing pretty well. All of a sudden I got a little credibility for maybe knowing what I was doing. But what really gave me credibility is when my buddies who coached, my male buddies who coached and worked with me in the department, they had daughters. And those daughters started growing up. All of a sudden they're, hey, Terry, tell me a little bit more about what you're doing in volleyball here. My kid wants to be a setter. They'd start coming to my camps. So dads want good things for their daughters too. And I felt when I was an athletic director that the men who were my age and younger, they were pretty darn good to work with. They kind of understood that. There were some older fossil type people that they just needed to move on. And we've all seen those people. Don't ever be that person that retires 5 years before you leave a job, but you got all sorts of opinions. Once we got those people out of there and the younger people started coming in, we were good. You think about the Civil Rights Act, 1964. What happens in 2008? We elect a black president. Several generations went by. We don't even think twice about that now. Did people have strong opinions? Maybe so. But we had forced behavior change, and we had a majority good, positive attitude change. If we didn't, we would have never elected Obama as president. So you take Title IX, 72, 22, so 52 years. We've had several generations. It doesn't surprise me one bit that there's an interest and a following for women's sports. The groundwork was laid, the fuse had been ignited. What does it take? Just a couple of star personalities, a couple controversies, a crazy coach at Louisiana State, you know, that kind of thing. It gets people talking and gets people interested. But forced behavior change, attitude change, kids growing up to next to each other in a world that makes sense, and we're going to be fine. And I agree with what I think Joe said about corporate CEOs, that kind of thing. We still don't have a huge number of women as CEOs, but the good companies, the good big companies, have been smart enough to put women on their leadership teams and their marketing teams. And that combination has made a huge difference. So I'm not super surprised. I just was hoping it wouldn't take much longer. Thanks.
Or to have some good data.
Thank you, guys. Any questions?
Did we answer your question kind of in that one? Okay.
Hey, I'm in the journalism program here as well, actually. And last quarter, I did a story on a couple of our senior basketball players, and I talked to Dr. Tracy Everbach. I think she's from like University of Northern Texas. She like specializes in like sports media and like gender studies and everything too. And something she said that stuck with me was that you can't be what you can't see. And it kind of made me think of how you mentioned that the women's final game was like at noon when the men's was at 6. And so I was just wondering if anybody, either of y'all, want to speak to like what more equality in media coverage can do for young women athletes?
I think that, again, there just has to be, we talk about women in these positions, but we have to have men that are owners of companies or CEOs saying that, it's all about dollars too. If they can have viewership and they can get the money for their commercials and things, that's what they're looking at. But I think it's just that attitude that we need to not, that was a problem. We had lots of conversations with people. That was a problem that game was at noon and not at 4, 5, 6, and I think they heard loud and clear, but, ESPN, part of my notes was ESPN broadcast the draft last night, and that was the first time I was told. I know they did little pieces here and there, but it was the first time that they broadcast the women's draft. And I think there was only 12 or 15, but it was a pretty cool event. I mean, I watched it. I was like, so I mean, I think it's just when they understand there's people that want to watch, that they're going to start saying they need to listen and they need to act and make sure that they're being equitable about times and coverage.
And that 1996 gold medal soccer game in Atlanta that drew all those people to the stadium, they didn't even show it on TV. They showed a partial, a few minutes of the game live, and that was it. I mean, that's just nuts, right? I mean, that game that attracted that many people physically to be present there in the first gold medal game for women's soccer in Olympic history, and NBC didn't even think to show the whole thing, or think there'd be enough interest to show the whole thing. But you got to see it to be it, right? I mean, this past weekend on Sunday, the Women's World Ice Hockey Championship was held, right? So it's held every 2 years, I believe. And the United States and Canada have this knockdown, drag-out, wonderful rivalry going on. It's been going on for years and years and years. And Canada won in this thrilling overtime game. And it was on the NHL network. And I tried so hard to figure out how to stream it, and I couldn't do it. We didn't have Paramount Plus or whatever we needed to get the game, but it's a world championship game in ice hockey. We just started. I mean, the United States just started a national women's ice hockey league, a professional league, the first one ever, and that game wasn't on accessible TV for the championship game between these two bitter rivals, and it turned out to be a great game. So yeah, there's definitely a long way to go as far as getting people to understand that people want to watch this stuff.
All right, well, that leads us to our third and final question. I think we may have covered a little bit of this with the last question, but as we consider the future of women's athletics, can you share some of your thoughts on issues and areas where we can continue to advance in women's sports?
Yeah, I think, like she said, we've hit a lot of them. Like I keep saying, I think it's, media coverage, it's really important. It's significant influence on the public and perception. Like she talked about, I had more people talk to me about basketball this year about, isn't Caitlin Clark and Juju and all this, isn't it great? And the games, and I'm like, you know, they kept, and I said, well, yeah, I've been watching it for 25 years. Well, trying to find it for 25, 30 years, wherever it's to. I talked about the draft already. You know, and again, like I said earlier, I think we have to continue the storytelling. And I think it's important for you to ask questions to your grandparents, parents about what conversation, you know, what were their opportunities, especially the women. You know, I think you'd find some things, or your neighbor or somebody that you knew kind of did athletics. I think it's really important to hear those, and you guys need to be the storytellers to let the generations know about, you know, Terry's a little older than I am, but I always thought we were a pioneer too, but like she said, it was the women that came before us that set that groundwork. Our coaches that stepped out there, these PE teachers that knew nothing about volleyball or basketball, but the men coaches were there to say, hey, we'll help you, and they learned the game, and they were willing to go out and be there to help initiate this initiative that was just passed. So again, I think the storytelling and just the conversations that people can have, and the people in marketing, like she had referenced, you know, talking to these big companies, they have lots of advertising dollars that they need to get on board and know that the viewership's there. And I know it's about money, but the viewership's there, and to continue to do that. So, and then I think the last thing that I have is that, well, two things. I think we, again, need to band together to overcome any negativity and stand up for conversations that tend to be negative towards the movement, their opportunities. And, you know, your generation doesn't seem to have as much problem with that, but we've fought our whole life about, no, that's not right. You know, Terry especially, she was a great athletic director of a really big district, and she was a role model for everybody. Everybody loved her, and she did a lot for all the sports, but really for women's sports. And I think we all have to have, you know, stand up for when we hear inequities, and don't allow people to try to push it aside and say it's not that big a deal. The ice situation was a great one, you know. But more importantly, and you know, I'd just like to close to say that, you know, I think continuing to mentor is important. To have people like the Terrys and other women that are here to mentor other athletic directors, other coaches, other women executives in companies, you know, to continue to mentor them. And the other thing about that really warmed my heart about, again, the women's basketball this year is, I don't know if all of you noticed, but the broadcasters were women, and they were way more fun to listen to. They weren't over here talking about something that didn't matter. The referees, there was more women referees, there was women coaches. There was just a lot more women in those places. They were down on the floor interviewing, you know, and some of those women have been there, but it's been a pretty male-dominated events, and I just thought that was really heartwarming. So they need to continue to mentor coaches, people in all the areas I just mentioned, and give them opportunities. I think it's great the officials, more and more women officials are getting in there, and I think whatever your passion is, you can make a difference. So your generation is the one that needs to continue this. You know, we all kind of stepped on the grounds of the people before us, but we were kind of the early birds. But it's a great initiative, and I think that we've made a lot of strides, and we'll continue to make strides. And the last thing I have to say, and this cracked me up because I saw this on social media. So this is the 50th anniversary of when, how was it stated? That women had the opportunity to get their own credit cards. It was 50 years ago. If a woman wanted a credit card, their husband, not partner, not boyfriend, girlfriend, their husband had to sign for that credit card. And I remember my mom was a working mom back then and made more than my dad in the 50s, and my mom was furious. I remember her talking about it, and when I saw that on social media today, I thought, wow, well, we have made strides in that area because we can get any cards we want right now. I thought I had to bring that up because I think that your generation doesn't understand some of the weird things that we had to go through. So thanks for having me.
So shortly after Title IX, and there's statistics that I don't remember about this, the details of, but there were a ton of men who started coaching things like basketball, right? And that was a source of some worry among, you know, people who had proponents of Title IX, because, you know, here all these men were hogging up all the coaching jobs. And I think that's another thing that's seen a shift. And you all, you know, women basketball players and the athletes that are here, I think it's really important on the theme of you have to see it to be it, to coach people, right? To take those coaching positions and have people recognize that that your expertise in the sport and that you can be a leader and have women coaching girls. I think that's really important to see. I mean, not anything against guys, and you know, Gino Arema, he's a really interesting guy, and he's really candid, and he's a great interview, and he's a great coach. But I noticed more. It seemed like there were more women coaches in this NCAA tournament. I don't know if that was the case or like numbers wise. I haven't counted up or seen any numbers that have to do with that. But I think that those kinds of jobs are really important to have women in them, because you really do. You know, this 9-year-old girl that's playing basketball really needs to see female coaches, and you have a great one here. And at Western has always been so terrific in having great women coaches here, and that's really important. It's really cool to see.
You know, I just have a couple things to say on thoughts and on issues and areas. I'm concerned. I think athletics in general, men and women, we have a loyalty issue. I'm worried about kids bolting from one school to another, looking for greener pastures. I think you can bloom where you are planted, and I hope that somebody smarter than me comes up with some sort of an initiative or some sort of a program that works on building loyalty and getting kids to understand that, you know, we're in this together, and through thick or thin, we keep working and keep trying and keep going toward our destination, and that our first thought isn't we're going to bolt if things don't go our way, or if we think that we can make more money somewhere else. And that being able to make money while you're a college athlete has really skewed things. I'm concerned about that. But if I take that down into the ranks of the secondary schools and the elementary schools and some of our communities, I'm concerned that we don't have training opportunities for every little kid that's out there. And I think that the gap is growing, just continues to grow. It is very expensive for kids to play private club sports these days. And I spent my last 7 years in the Highline school district, and there were many pockets of poverty and some refugee dropping points. And then on the south end of the district, there was some high income, great wealth. And I saw the difference every day. And I'm very, very concerned because kids in poor neighborhoods who exhibit some athletic skill are poached. They're poached now. They will be poached even more. And if you haven't seen the article in the Seattle Times that has come out in the last few days about the possibility of a transfer portal at the high school level, check it out, because it's quite a conversation. And it sounds like it was initiated and driven by a legislator. And I was on the WIAA board, our governing body, for a while. And there was always a fear that the legislature was going to swoop in and start telling us what to do for sports. And we like to think that we had a good handle on high school sports and the pulse of what was going on. If that's mandated from above, from a government agency, I think we're going to be in trouble. I mean, it's already an issue. Transferring is already an issue. You guys know that. You've seen it. Some of you may have transferred yourselves, but I'm worried. I'm just worried about those gaps just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and the whole me movement will continue to take over, because I think it's not so great right now. So I see that as our biggest issue. And maybe it's not as big an issue at your level at Division II, but I think it can be. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Stay loyal to your school. Go Western.
here, and thank you three for being here. Wrap it up there.